Hello, my name is Richard Rodriguez, and this is the code revision for the AIGrid. The product owner, as well as the mentor, is Dr. Masood Sajadi. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we have the AIGrid, the original program, as you can tell, and on the right-hand side, I have the revision, the revised code. Um, for this project, I decided to, for the meantime, leave the parameters as they are, so those are going to stay the same. And I wanted to concentrate on minimizing the functions to make them more readable. So we're going to do a comparison one by one. And in this case, we're going to start with init. So in init, as you can tell, I am using uniform programming style, just like the one in Java, C, and C++, in which we have the same tab space, and it makes it just a little bit more readable. But it's actually performing the same functions. The kind of equity is there, the marketing info, if it's the digits that we want, then it multiplies those, and I remove garbage that it's not being used. If we go into its position for the ranking, you can tell that this one is actually bigger than the one that I have. The reason for that is that I'm trying to minimize the expressions that are being done inside the if statements, and also I'm trying to eliminate multiple or nested if statements. As an example, on the left hand side, we have this expression being calculated on the inside, but it's not readable when we see the if statement. In my case, what I did, since that is checking for the same symbol and that it's our magic number, then I created a boolean variable by the name order belongs to this EA, and then I check against it. If it's true, then it goes into the body from here to here. The same thing for this part. This is a nested if statement, and on the right hand side, what I'm doing is that I'm creating two boolean variables that are computing the same expression, and then we're checking if those are true via an AND operator. Next, I did the same thing on this one. I created a boolean variable by the name in close proximity, and then the if statement is checked against that. So this makes it a little bit more readable. And in other cases, like here, where we don't need the braces, I remove them to make them more readable and easier to grasp. If we go to the next function, close all open orders, this one didn't have that many changes. Basically, we're not doing anything here, so I removed those. These part here are usually the same within the next 3 or 4 functions. So if we go to the next one, all pending orders, as you can tell, this one is a little bit easier to read because it follows the same style that we're used to in Java and C and C++. And if we go to close pending long orders, again, it's just easier to read. And close pending short orders, it's about the same as well. And the same with close all orders. So again, this one had this, which I'm sure the author was using at one time to test it. But since the author abandoned the EA, he never got to clean it. The same thing with close long orders, and the same thing with close short orders. So as you can tell, a lot of these functions are doing the same thing over and over, but with different expressions and different positions that they're checking. Now if we go into start, so for start, basically I tried again to minimize as much as possible. This part is almost the same, as you can tell here. So I didn't change anything on this, except for, again, the expression on the inside, which I am putting as equity is increasing, this is what it's calculating. For close all with equity decrease, well, in this case we need to calculate the decrease. So I calculated one that is equity is decreasing, and then it checks the if statement against that. This part, as you can tell, now it's aligned, whereas here it wasn't. And on the next one, basically we're calculating if we have reached the next interval in time to see if there have been any changes. If that's the case, then we continue. So this whole thing, basically I separated into a different expression, and its result goes into the Boolean on next interval and can trade. If that's true, then it goes all the way from here and all the way to the end of the start function, and then it returns. But let's go over really quick. So if consider spread equals true, in this case we don't need to put is equal to true, because if when we leave it empty, automatically it's checking for a true statement. So that remains the same. This, I remove the braces from here because it makes it more readable. Again, we remove unused methods that weren't being used. We're checking again in equity control lots. And again, we're calculating. Here I didn't make changes, just clean it up a little bit. The comments that I had once placed are still there, as you can tell. And then through the iterations of the order, that remains the same. But as you can tell now, the for statements, where it does a count of those that are buy orders and sell orders, it's a little more readable. And instead of using an else, I just use an if statement because it's easier to check that way. For the unbalanced long-short control lots, basically for the if statement, again, I did the same thing. I removed the expression and I calculated on the outside. This remains the same. And for the trailing stop didn't have any issues on it, except that it didn't look right by placing it on the right hand side. Therefore, I moved it under it. This remains the same. For the use MACD, so there are different expressions like this one here, this one, and this one, which will all be calculated. These are not nested if statements, so you can tell this one starts here, ends here. The same with this one, starts here, ends here. So why not calculate all of these at the beginning and make it more readable? So in my case, I created all of these here, which made them much more readable, and then we calculate for the pending all orders, which are these two. So if this or if that is true, then basically it's doing the same thing. So why not just do one of it? This part remains the same. Again, these ones are separate. So, and for use SAR, basically we are doing the same thing. I calculated this one as another variable called trending up and trending down, and then I use if statements again just to make them more readable, but these are just reassigning variable. For use MA group, basically this one starts here, ends there, and we're doing the same thing, removing the whole expression. In my case, I named this one trending up, then trending down, and basically we're running it against the if statement. So as you can tell, it's easier to read, especially when we don't have any garbage in between. For the for, so basically we're iterating through the different grids, and the beginning stays the same. This one stays the same as well. Now the if statement, again, I calculated a Boolean variable on the outside that calculates, which is this whole expression here, which is huge. And I broke it down into two pieces, into two lines, and it's still big. And then we do the if statement. But again, now we're checking if the trade are longs and they're only positive, then we begin from here all the way to here. And I think this is the most important part that I have done so far. So if you notice from here all the way to here, let's check in the profit rank 1 and the position. For the profit rank 2, if it's true, and this bar is true as well, it's going all the way from here to here. And for the profit rank 3, it's the same thing, three times. Now, not everything is the same. Almost everything is the same. As you can tell, the modes are the same, including the expressions. What changes are the order that is being sent. For the rate on this part, you can tell that it's almost similar, but this one includes, it's adding a grid size to the base take profit. And this one is multiplying the grid size times 2. So what I notice is this one, we can also say that it's being multiplied times 1. And here, it's being multiplied times 0. So I can actually combine these three if statements into a for loop that iterates 3 different times. And that's exactly what I did. The profit ranks, I placed them in an array of size 3. And the position ranking, I also placed them in an array of 3. Then I began the for loop. And basically it only goes into the for loop when, again, this expression and this expression is true, which is being calculated from before, from the is position. So if it's true, then just to make a comparison one by one, on one of them, the stop loss is 0. If this expression is greater than 0, is there as well. And otherwise, else if is also there. We don't need the braces because it's only one statement. For the enter mode, I am using an if else, an alternate. So if this is true, then we do OP stop, which is the same thing that we're doing here. Otherwise, we're doing OP limit, which is the same thing that we're doing here. And then this part here, this expression, I moved it into a boolean by the name favorable conditions, and then we test against that. If that is true, then we send the order in. And again, this is multiply, it goes from 0 all the way to 2. At first, on the very first one, when it's 0, that means that the multiplier, in this case, the grid size and 0 will be 0, and we'll just have base take profit. When it's 1, then we'll have grid size times 1 into the multiplier, which is the same thing as grid size. And when it's 2, again, it'll be 2 times grid size, which is what we had here before. For the next one, basically, if we want shorts, we're doing the same thing that we did up here. And so we calculate. Again, we don't want this expression inside the if statement to make it rateable. So I placed it on the outside, and then we have the if statement. And then, again, we iterate 3 times, going from 0 to 3 through the profit rank, except that this time it's a little bit different. The expression is a little bit different, as you can tell from here. So that's what I did here. And then we send in the ticket, the order, if we have favorable conditions. And again, the favorable conditions are check here. by moving the expression to the outside, just like I did here. For close pending positions, not much change in there, except for the expression on the inside, it was moved to the outside. And then it finishes. For the trailing stop, as you can tell, it's a little bit smaller. So basically, it's doing the same function. It's iterating through all the different orders and selecting it. Again, this expression here, if it's our EA, the order for our EA, then I created a boolean, and then we're checking against that, and it only goes inside if it's true. And then we are checking this expression. If it's a double by, then instead of doing two multiple if statements inside those two, I basically created two boolean variables to get the result back on those. And if those two result in true, then we send in the order modification, which is the same thing. This one only goes inside to this one when it's true, and this one only executes this when this is true. So it's an AND logical operator. And then basically we perform a similar function when we have cell, but we're doing an else in this case. So I created, again, two variables, boolean variables, and then we check against those. And if that is true, then again we execute the order modify. And pretty much this, the original was 963 lines. This one is about 702, 703. What I'm planning on doing is to minimize still some of the functions that are similar, just like the ones that close, the pending orders, the short orders, the long orders, to see if I'm able to minimize that as well to make the logic simpler. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, you can contact myself or the product owner and mentor at the emails provided. Thank you.